Hello, time for another vlog. Have you ever wondered what happens after you die, if anything? Well, I have. Is that the end? Is there more? Is there any evidence? Well, there is evidence of sorts. I mean, it's not the sort of evidence that will satisfy a die-hard materialist. Let's face it, they want something they can get their hands on, something really tangible. But there is evidence from near-death experiences, evidence of sorts. Okay, it's essentially hearsay, but you can still categorise the hearsay and measure it pretty carefully by questioning lots of people from different cultures and in different circumstances and so on. So there's evidence of sorts. And people like Peter Fenwick and Elizabeth Fenwick and Dean Radin and people like this have been exploring these sorts of situations. The University of Virginia's psychology department too, or department of something, I forget, but something like that, have been trying to work it out. Okay. And the near-death experience gives you perhaps an idea of what happens, although of course these people come back to life to report it. But what I found particularly interesting was that I was looking at the Tibetan Book of the Dead lately, and now they've been thinking about death and all that for thousands of years, and although these ancient books are a bit dull, I mean, all of them, to be honest, you look at them and you think, what is this superstitious nonsense? Okay. They're not so well written either, and racy novels they are not. Okay. They're kind of turgid and simple and complicated at the same time, but simplistic perhaps. They're sort of Bronze Age and pre-Bronze Age type writings, and they have that non-professional aspect to them, if you like. But what struck me as really interesting is that the description of the afterlife in the Tibetan Book of the Dead has many, many parallels with what people report in their near-death experiences. So I thought I'd just go through them. Because maybe there's something to it. I mean, we'll know when we get there if we retain proper consciousness. And that means being in some kind of calm, collected and controlled state of mind, really. And when I say mind, I mean awareness rather than the verbal mind. So, let's just describe typical near-death experiences, and then we'll look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead a bit. Often when people are going to die, like in the next couple of weeks, they see spirits and beings waiting for them. Now I didn't see anything about this in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to be honest, but I just thought I'd mention it. It's like a prodrome to the whole event. Like people are waiting to guide you onto the next phase. Just worth mentioning. But when people have their actual near-death experiences, when they've actually had the accident or whatever, or illness or whatever it is that nearly kills them, what they typically say happens is they start out seeing a bright light, a super bright light, much brighter than anything they can see on Earth, but it doesn't hurt their eyes. I mean, sometimes they just see themselves floating above their bodies, okay, and then they see a light and a tunnel, and they go for it. And they go through this tunnel typically, and sometimes they'll be sent back. It's not your time yet. And sometimes they'll reach a land with beautiful landscapes like English countryside or Arcadian fields, sort of thing. And they'll see their relatives deceased and friends, and maybe spirit guides and others there. Sometimes, especially, there are videos on YouTube from Christians in particular who say they meet, God or Jesus and so on. There are people from other religions who meet people as well. And there are then videos of people who are taken to see one place, and then they're taken to see another place, and the other place is like a hell realm where there are demons torturing people, torturing them possibly, and it's like seriously awful, and obviously they're concerned about it. Right? It's a little bit worrying. And usually after their little tour of these realms, they're sent back because it's not their time yet. And that's kind of near-death experiences. Not everybody goes to both realms, but some people do in the near-death experiences. So remember that sequence: bright light, pleasant land, unpleasant land. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Buddhist scheme generally, really, you go to the bardo when you die. This is a realm of waiting, basically. I suppose for stuff to happen. Now, the whole point of Buddhism, and indeed Hinduism in a way, and other religions, is for you to achieve some form of spiritual awakening. And the Buddhists call it enlightenment. In Christianity you might see the light, be born again, or something of this sort. They use these metaphors. In Buddhism and Hinduism, being born again isn't a metaphor. They mean it literally. But the first thing... another thing actually that near-death experiencers often experience is their life flashes before their eyes right after they've died, or just before, as they're dying. Okay. Now, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, what happens, they say, you see a brilliant white light, and that is the thing you should go towards. That is your path out of the wheel of illusion. All these stupid delusion lands that we live in, like the earth, the afterlife, it's all rubbish. We should be going for the light of consciousness. Okay, so when you see that bright light, go for it, and know that you are getting out of delusion. You have to know that, otherwise other things start to happen. You will start to see random scenes from your life, just like the near-death experiencers who say they see their life flashing towards them, all of their lives. The Tibetans say you see random scenes from your life. I'm sure it's close. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if you can get into the white light fully, you're out. You've escaped. You are in Nirvana. You're out of the wheel of illusion. They see the life and death sequence as like a big wheel that you go around again and again to rebirth and rebirth, to deal with issues. And the main thing you're trying to do is achieve this enlightenment, this knowledge that you are nothing but the God within you, the consciousness, the awareness. That feeling of being you is the same as the feeling of being you and everybody else, and it's the one thing that we all are. We're all God, sort of, or parts of, if you like. Or that which is experiencing experiences through us. But the mental us is just full of mistakes and errors and illusions and ignorance and so on. And the point is to get out of all that, because life is suffering, because it's change, because it always changes. There must be suffering. So see the bright light soon after you died, go for it. Try to merge with the Godhead or whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but that's your way out. Failing that, and it can be very brief apparently, this bright light, like a flash of lightning, or it can be long, drawn out, I don't know. But the point is to know what you're looking at when you get there. You've got to try and be composed as you go. Difficult in some circumstances, obviously. If you don't catch the light, or you go and miss the point, you can end up in the peaceful realms, landscapes, relatives and friends who've died before, people like that. And we think of that as like heaven, but apparently it's not permanent. It's part of the wheel of change. And you can go on from there to the realm of the angry gods, or the angry demons, the hell realms, in other words. And it's worth knowing that this afterlife feels more real even than this life. We think we're living in a real world here. And I don't know what the status of it is, but we think we're living in a real world. Apparently, according to near-death experiences, it's more real there than here. So you go to these hell realms, and you're likely, if you are not composed, to think you're in big trouble, right? These monsters are out to get you, maybe they are getting you, and you want to escape. You run away, you panic, you forget yourself. Key point. You're in real trouble when you do that. And you might see coloured lights as opposed to white lights. The Tibetan Book of the Dead advises you do not follow the coloured lights, because if you do, you are plunged back into a new life on Earth. And presumably, it will be relating to the issue that the demons were trying to, or were reflecting to you in your own psyche. So you will probably come back to a pretty unpleasant life. I guess. I'm guessing there. But the point of these realms, the point of all experience, is to bring you to wakefulness. And that means removing ignorance and delusion from you. So when bad things happen, it's a reflection of your own mind. I'm not saying it's your own fault. Not at all, because we're all working from a position of not knowing. But it's just a true reflection. Trying to think of an example. If you are a person who's, I don't know, full of racial hatred or something, and you go around hating people of some other race, maybe you hate white people or something, I don't know. When they treat you badly, it's only to be expected, because they can tell, right? Okay. So it's a reflection of your own ignorance. And the Tibetan Buddhists kind of say that it's all a reflection. Life is a mirror entirely. So if you have problems of scarcity, lack of money, constant illness, being treated badly by people, there are issues within your own outlook that are not helping, let's say. And in fact, psychologists tend towards the same kind of view. The thing is, we don't really resolve issues. When we have issues, what tends to happen is we don't actually solve them. We tend to transcend them. That is, they become irrelevant. We realise that it's just things we're thinking, ultimately, and we don't have to think them. Our attitude to things is what bothers us much more than the things themselves. And there are physical issues to be got over, certainly, but our attitude to them is the main source of the suffering, in fact. That's the idea. And when you can truly let them go, or in other words just accept them, okay, it's real, then they start to lift. Then you start to go past them onto the next thing. So, in the hell realms, don't follow the coloured lights if you can help it, because you're likely to come back to an unplanned, nasty life on Earth. That's how I read it anyway. If you endure the hell realms, you go on to a realm where you and your guide can sit there and look at lives on Earth and look at your past life and plan a reincarnation to deal with specific issues. And you'll come back. Now the Tibetans, again, they say, don't do this either, actually. I mean, okay, if you get there and you do it, you do it. We must have done it billions of times according to them. But ideally, remember that all of this is delusion. And that is the enlightened state, when you stay in the state of knowing that you're just experiencing a movie, essentially. They say don't come back. Not without knowing what you're doing, anyway. And they say that some of the people who go into the light, the white light, do choose to come back anyway, because in a sense, because we're all one, we're all part of the infinite, then we're not out until we're all out. And I don't know what happens then, of course. But it's interesting that the near-death experiences and the Tibetan Book of the Dead describe pretty much the same process. And I guess with hundreds of years or thousands of years to think about it and to study it intelligently, because people thousands of years ago were every bit as smart as we are, it's not surprising perhaps that they've come to look at the same evidence and see it much the same way, actually. So, what do you think? Isn't it strange? But of course they may be seeing the same delusions and illusory near-death experiences a materialist would say. Are they real? Personally, I think they probably are. You can see my video on why materialism is obsolete, if you like. But anyway, it's interesting, it makes you wonder. And when you die, go for that white light. Right, get into it. That's full. The light of consciousness, the light of knowing that everything else is illusion. Go. Okay. If you see it. If you don't, I don't know. Bye for now.